intensity technique is going to be isometrics. So previously we've looked over iso holds. I briefly mentioned in that video that iso holds were in a similar class as isometrics, but they are different. So with iso holds, we're holding static, but against a sub-maximal intensity, sub-maximal tension. Isometrics are going to be contracting against an immovable object, immovable load, but it is a maximal contraction. So these are going to be extremely taxing. You're not supposed to be holding isometrics for a minute long. These are going to be brief bouts, brief bursts of maximal effort. So what I'm going to be doing here is demoing it on a deadlift, which is going to be probably a little bit contraindicated for most people because a deadlift is going to be extremely energetically taxing and a little bit risky if you don't know what you're doing. But again, the idea here is not to have a ton of load on the bar, it's to contract, pull against an immovable object. So what I'm gonna be doing is I have this set up in a rack. I have the pins, the spotter arms set low. So I'm going to be pulling against an immovable object that is going to be about at my knees. So once the bar hits the spotter arms, the spotter straps, it's going to catch, and then it's not going to let me pull any further. So I actually am not gonna have any load on the bar. That is just gonna act as my joint, essentially. And then I'm gonna pull as hard as I can into the straps for 5 seconds, and then that is all I'm doing. That's the entire set. What you can do here is you can perform bouts. So you can perform multiple repetitions of isometrics. You can also do this in a number of different ways, but just to hammer home the point, I actually think that the deadlift example is the best one because, again, no load on the bar. It's all external resistance coming from the straps here. So I'm gonna step back in. I'm gonna set up as if I were performing a normal deadlift because, again, that's the whole idea here. The whole idea is to pull as hard as I can. I'm gonna set myself up. I'm gonna start pulling. And as those straps catch, so now they've caught, I can't pull any further. So this is as far as I can pull. So now I'm going to exert as much force into this bar as I can. I'm gonna try and lift the rack off the ground. 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're gonna pretend that that didn't just kind of unlock there. But the idea there being that once you're done with that, your nervous system is absolutely on fire. So every single muscle fiber, every motor unit that is needed to pull a maximal effort deadlift has been fired during that because your body thinks that it's performing a max effort deadlift that got stuck at that point. So this translates over in a lot of different ways, but the most important one is maximal power, maximal force output. So you'll see this done every once in a while for power athletes, strength athletes. Typically not going to be something that is done too frequently with hypertrophy or bodybuilding athletes, but it still can be used in a number of different scenarios, number of different ways, if your goal is to improve your strength, improve your power. So there are a lot of different outputs or outcomes for isometrics. They range from, again, increased strength, increased power. You can use them as a way to overcome injuries. So if you have an injury in the top of the range of motion of a deadlift, for example, you can work through the bottom, you can do bouts. If you want to increase your tendon strength, you can do that with single joint movements as well. So if I were to perform a isometric here in elbow extension and try and push as hard as I can through my opposite hand, I'm performing an isometric. My arm is not moving, but my triceps are firing and my tendon is actually getting a little bit stronger there as well. So lots of different applications, lots of different ways that you can use isometrics, but for our purposes as an intensity technique, think of it in the reference of a deadlift at maximal force, and I think you're gonna be pretty close to the mark. So make sure you know what you're doing, try and apply them, and remember that they are different from iso holds.